There's a moment in every franchise rebuild when the abstract becomes concrete, when the PowerPoint slides and the draft board analytics and the carefully worded press releases about building the right way. When all of that stops being an organizational vision and starts being a human being standing on a real grass field, throwing a real football to real people wearing the same jersey. That moment happened in Las Vegas this week, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since. Fernando Mendoza put on a Raiders uniform, walked onto that practice field, took snaps under the Las Vegas coaching staff, and suddenly every projection I've been running in my head for the last 4 months either got validated or got exposed. There's no middle ground anymore. The theoretical phase of evaluating this kid is done. Closed. We're in the real thing now, and what I watched in those early OTA clips was not what I expected. It was more interesting than that, and more complicated, and honestly more exciting than I'm comfortable admitting right now without immediately qualifying everything that comes after. Let me be upfront about something before I go any further, because intellectual honesty matters more to me than sounding certain. May football is a hall of mirrors. Early voluntary OTAs do not show you a quarterback's pocket composure when a 270-pound edge rusher is coming through the beak and safety is giving him a too-high shell, and then rotating down at the snap to take away the crossing route he thought was open. They don't show you what happens to a quarterback's decision-making clock when the consequences of being wrong are real and immediate and painful. All of that gets revealed later, in pads, in August heat, when the competition stops being friendly. What these early sessions legitimately tell you is narrower but still meaningful. Ball flight mechanics, the natural rhythm of a delivery, and whether a quarterback looks like he belongs in the environment or like the environment is still sitting on his chest. On those specific, legitimate metrics, Mendoza was something else. I watched the clips more than once, specifically because I was suspicious of my own reaction. I was looking for confirmation bias. I was trying to catch myself seeing what I wanted to see rather than what was actually there. And even after running that skeptical filter, the release held up. The spiral is genuinely tight. The trajectory control on intermediate throws is precise in a way that doesn't show up on a combine sheet. But what got me, what I keep coming back to, is the physical looseness. There's an ease to how he delivers the football that feels almost untouched by the cognitive weight of everything happening around him. That matters more than it might sound. Here's something I've watched happen to promising quarterbacks more times than I want to count. A guy comes into his first NFL environment with a clean, fluid release built from years of muscle memory, and then gradually, sometimes over months, sometimes faster, the mental demands of professional football start colonizing his mechanics. He's processing protection assignments and coverage rotations and route adjustments and pre-snap communication all at once, and the brain starts competing with the body for resources. And the first thing that pays the price is the looseness in the delivery. The rhythm becomes mechanical. The release tightens. You can see it happen in real time on film if you know what you're looking for. The quarterback starts looking like someone trying to do 10 things correctly instead of someone doing one thing naturally. Mendoza, through these early sessions, doesn't look like that's happening yet. The looseness is intact, and that's not a cosmetic observation. It's a functional signal about how his mental processing is managing the transition. It tells you something real about the bandwidth capacity of the person throwing the football, not just the arm that's throwing it. I'm not ready to call it a conclusion, but I'm absolutely ready to call it a meaningful early data point. Kirk Cousins was also out there, and I want to be straight with you about what I saw, because fairness matters here even when it creates an uncomfortable contrast. 14 years of professional football produces something real. A reliability, a technical cleanliness, a professional execution that doesn't wobble. Cousins looked exactly like what he is, a proven veteran who knows precisely where to put the football and does it without drama. The throw to Dante Thornton was accurate. It landed where it needed to land. Nothing was mechanically wrong with anything he did. I want to be clear about that. But here's the thing I can't unsee, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise just to sound balanced. When you watch Mendoza's release alongside Cousins in the same session, on the same day, against the same backdrop, you're not watching two quarterbacks competing for the same job. You're watching two completely different categories of decision that a franchise has to make. One quarterback represents what this team can be for the next 2 years. The other represents what this team could be for the next decade. One is a bridge that keeps the organization functional while everything around it gets built. The other is the destination. And the longer this summer competition runs and the more evidence accumulates, the harder it's going to become for anyone, coaches, front office, media, fans, to look at both of those truths simultaneously and pretend the situation is genuinely unresolved. Now I need to talk about something that isn't getting the attention it deserves, and I want you to pay close attention to this because it's the kind of detail that reveals organizational thinking more clearly than any press conference ever will. As OTAs continue and media gets full access to practices, watch the rep distribution. I mean actually track it. Which quarterback is taking first-team reps? which receivers are being deployed for which quarterback, whether Mendoza is consistently working against the starters or getting cycled through the second unit in a way that telegraphs the organizational hierarchy before anyone has officially declared one. This is not a minor procedural detail. Rep distribution in spring practice is one of the most direct and honest communications a coaching staff makes about how it actually views a competition, as opposed to the careful, hedged language they deliver from a podium when a microphone is in their face. Coaches manage their public words constantly and skillfully. They manage rep distribution less consciously, and that's precisely why it tells you more. Which brings me directly to what head coach Clint Kubiak has been saying publicly, because there's a statement that came out of his recent comments that I think has been dramatically under-scrutinized. Kubiak said, and I want to make sure I'm representing this precisely, that his dream scenario, his best-case vision for how this whole situation unfolds, is a year where Fernando Mendoza develops on the sideline while Kirk Cousins handles the starting role. His dream, the thing he would choose if he could choose anything. A rookie quarterback who was taken in this draft, who represents the direction this franchise is pointing, watching games from the bench for an entire season. That's the outcome Clint Kubiak publicly identified as optimal. Sit with that for a moment. Not because it's obviously wrong, but because it's not obviously right either. And the reflexive acceptance of the developmental patience narrative is exactly how promising careers get quietly and painlessly derailed without anyone ever having to take direct responsibility. Let me give the developmental argument its full due, because intellectual honesty requires it. A quarterback coming out of an RPO-heavy college offense, stepping into a pro-style West Coast system, is navigating a cognitive transition that is genuinely, meaningfully difficult. The protection communication demands are a completely different language. The pre-snap coverage recognition requirements operate at a speed and complexity that college football simply doesn't prepare you for, no matter how talented you are. The case for sitting Mendoza, for giving him a full year inside a professional system, learning how a 14-year veteran prepares during the week, processes film, manages the physical and mental grind of a full NFL season. That case is not foolish. A quarterback who gets that education before his first real starts might be dramatically better equipped when his actual moment arrives. I understand why Kubiak holds that position, but here is my counter, and I want to say it as directly as I'm capable of saying anything. What Kubiak is calling his dream scenario is also, with uncomfortable precision, a fairly accurate description of how organizations have quietly killed the development of promising young quarterbacks throughout NFL history. The patient plan where the veteran plays just competently enough, not spectacularly, not embarrassingly, just functionally, to maintain his grip on the starting role, is also the plan that produces 8-8 seasons. Seasons that don't generate meaningful playoff momentum, don't create any live competitive experience for the quarterback who represents everything the franchise is building toward, and end with the entire developmental timeline pushed back by 12 months. And at the end of that year, when you're looking backward honestly and asking what the patience actually produced, what specific measurable benefit justified delaying the development of the player, the entire roster construction is oriented around. Those questions don't always yield satisfying answers. Cleveland lived this. Different names, different years, different quarterbacks with different stories attached to them. Same hollow outcome. The comfort of a plan executed competently without the plan ever generating the results that justified executing it. I'm not saying Kubiak is making the same mistake. I'm saying the possibility deserves honest scrutiny instead of being managed away with language about development timelines and organizational patience. Here's where I actually land on this, and the nuance matters. Kubiak's position is defensible under a specific condition. If Kirk Cousins gives this team a legitimate, credible chance to win meaningful football games. If the Raiders are sitting at 5-3 at the midpoint of the season, competing in tight divisional games, running a functional offense that's building towards something that actually resembles playoff relevance, I can accept that framework. A veteran quarterback steering a winning team while a rookie develops in a protected environment is a defensible outcome. That version of the plan makes sense. What I cannot accept is the other version. The version where the offense stagnates behind a quarterback who is never the long-term answer, where wins arrive inconsistently and unpredictably, where the season slowly dissolves into the fog of a mediocre campaign that's competent enough to justify continuing, but never good enough to actually go anywhere, where Mendoza sits on the sideline, accumulating no live competitive experience, while his developmental window keeps quietly contracting week by week. That version is not patience. That version is an organization prioritizing its own comfort over its actual future. Let me move to the wide receiver room because the quarterback conversation doesn't exist in isolation. It's inseparable from the offensive infrastructure around it. And what's being built around Mendoza is worth examining closely. Dante Thornton is the profile that makes defensive coordinators uncomfortable in the specific way that forces them to spend preparation time on a single receiver before they ever line up across from him. The size, the straight line acceleration, the ability to generate vertical separation against single coverage. These are not marginal tools. They're the foundation of a genuine big play threat. The question that separates the intriguing prospect from the receiver who actually becomes a consistent problem for defenses is the contested catch consistency. Winning the back shoulder throw when the margin for error is measured in inches. And everything about Mendoza's ball placement in these early clips, the precision, the touch, the placement on throws where placement is everything, suggests he can deliver that throw at a level that makes Thornton's athletic ceiling actually reachable. Beck is the name I keep circling back to every time I construct the offensive picture that's being assembled in Las Vegas, and I think his ceiling is being significantly underestimated right now. The route running intelligence is real, not just in a he runs good routes surface level sense, but in the more meaningful sense of a receiver who understands how to use his releases to manipulate a defender's leverage before the break even happens. The quickness in and out of those breaks is real, and the quality that I think matters most in the context of what this offense needs. The reliability in contested areas, the ability to function as a trusted outlet when a young quarterback's first progression collapses and he needs somewhere to go. That quality accumulates quietly into sustained target volume across a full season. In a Kubiak system, the receiver a young quarterback trusts on third down, who converts when the play design gets stressed by an unexpected defensive look, who wins in the moments that determine whether a drive ends in points or a punt, that player gets fed. Give Beck a full season with meaningful target volume and real opportunity, and the production reflects a ceiling considerably higher than his current reputation suggests. Malik Benson enters these OTAs as a speed profile worth tracking carefully because the vertical threat potential shows up on tape, rather than just in stopwatch numbers. And those are different things. What interests me most analytically about what he brings is the combination of explosive capability in targeted moments and his ability to affect a defense's preparation on every snap without the ball coming his way at all. A receiver who forces defensive coordinators to account for him in their game plan, even in the snaps where he's not the intended target, becomes a genuinely valuable chess piece in an offense built around creating horizontal stress through speed and space. On the defensive side, I want to give this group its proper acknowledgement because what's being assembled here deserves direct recognition rather than being treated as a footnote to the quarterback conversation. The linebacker pairing of Nakobe Dean and Quay Walker is something I didn't fully anticipate being as invested in as I am right now. The athleticism and range they bring together, covering ground against the run, matching up in space against receiving backs and tight ends, holding up in coverage situations that expose most linebacker pairs, has the potential to be one of the most consequential strengths on this entire roster once the season gets to the games that actually matter. Nobody is talking about it in a meaningful way right now. They will be before Thanksgiving. Jaden Mickens is the player I'm watching most carefully on the entire defensive side of the ball, and I think the story attached to him is one of the more compelling individual threads running through this roster. First-round caliber talent pushed into the fourth round by injury concerns, a 4.33 at his pro day, technical fluidity through rookie minicamp that impressed the people watching closely enough to notice. If he arrives at training camp healthy and at full capacity, the coverage quality across this secondary forces every member of that group to perform at the absolute ceiling of their range just to hold their roster spot. That level of internal competition doesn't just make the competition sharper, it makes every individual in the room demonstrably better over the course of a summer. Kyon Crossan at edge rusher is a name that deserves considerably more coverage than it's currently generating. The depth situation behind Max Crosby creates an opening that isn't just significant. It's the kind of role that can define an entire career if the right player steps into it. Right now, offensive coordinators can construct their protection plans primarily around containing Crosby and accept the exposure on the other side. A true second threat changes that calculation completely. It makes every player on this defensive front more dangerous, including Crosby himself, because no protection scheme can eliminate both threats simultaneously. The player who claims that role and performs in it earns something beyond a roster spot. He earns organizational leverage. DJ Glaze enters camp as the right tackle frontrunner with real starting experience behind him, and Colton Miller at left tackle is one of the most persistently underappreciated foundational pieces on this entire roster. The kind of player who performs at a high level consistently enough that the performance becomes invisible. People only notice the left tackle when something goes wrong, and Miller has spent years giving people very little to notice. The interior competition around the guard positions creates daily pressure that sharpens every player in the mix, and the overall unit has a realistic path to being meaningfully better than what Las Vegas put on the field a year ago. Here's where I land on all of it, and I want to be as honest as I'm capable of being about where I actually stand rather than hiding behind qualifications. This Raiders roster is genuinely exciting in a way that goes beyond the predictable optimism cycle every fan base runs through in the spring when the weather is nice and nobody has lost a game yet. The talent assembled in Las Vegas right now is real talent assembled with coherent organizational direction, not a collection of available pieces hoping that favorable outcomes emerge from their proximity to each other. There's actual intent visible in the construction. That's rarer than it should be, but the quarterback situation remains the unresolved gravitational center that everything else orbits around, and it's going to stay that way until training camp arrives and the competitive pressure makes avoidance structurally impossible. Kubiak has told you his preference. He's been explicit about it. The tension between that stated preference and what the competitive evidence might eventually force is real and building, and it's going to intensify through every week of OTAs and mandatory minicamp until August makes the conversation unavoidable. What I believe, based on everything Mendoza has shown through these early sessions, based on the release and the looseness and the ball placement and the physical ease of a quarterback who looks like he belongs in this environment, is this: if he keeps performing at the level his preparation and talent suggest he's capable of performing, the argument for keeping him on the sideline when real games begin is going to become increasingly difficult to make with a straight face. Coaching staffs arrive in the spring with plans they genuinely believe in. Quarterbacks who consistently outperform those plans have a way of rewriting them. Watch the rep distribution when media gets full access to these practices. Watch how Mendoza moves through his progressions as the defensive looks get more complex and sophisticated. Watch whether Cousins looks like a quarterback genuinely building chemistry with this group or like a professional who is executing his role with clear-eyed understanding of exactly what that role is and isn't. The answers to the questions that actually matter for this franchise's next decade are coming. Every practice rep brings them closer, and everything being assembled in Las Vegas right now, the talent, the competition, the organizational intent, and the specific, extraordinary quarterback at the center of all of it, makes me more invested in watching those answers arrive than I've been about anything happening in this league in a long time.